What's up, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Goal Line Dynasty. Today, Tyler and I are actually taking a look at some weird situated running backs around the league. We got about 5 or 6 of them to go over here. For those Dynasty formats, we're going to be discussing, what we expect out of them in 2023, taking a look at some recent trades that have been made, and let you know which side of those trades we're taking on whether or not we're buying or selling these guys before the 2023 season kicks off. But before the video kicks off, Tyler, how we doing, buddy?
I'm great. These are some murky waters that we're going to be diving into. Nobody likes to plant their flags in running backs right here at this time of year, but we're gonna start talking some values of guys who are in some weird situations. So it's going to be fun to squirm and see what we put together here.
Well, I'll kick us off here with our first one, and he has been a question mark at best for close to a year now, right? Javonte Williams went down with injury. What was it, like week 3 or week 4 in the 2022 season? There's a lot of reports that have come out recently saying he thinks he's going to be ready to go week 1, but a lot of people don't seem convinced. I personally am not convinced, but I still like Javonte from a dynasty standpoint. But anyway, Tyler, first trade I want to go over, very easy one, a 1-for-1. Would you rather take Javonte Williams or the rookie 107? And this is super flex picks, by the way.
107, pretty easily. Give me the high upside receiver. That's going to be either Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston. Give me that high upside receiver over the guy who is coming off of an absolutely destroyed knee. It's more than just an ACL. We know that. Like you said, I think the people who are saying that he's going to be back week 1, even if he is, like, look at the history of running backs coming off of ACLs in their year of return. Even it takes them until the end of the season to really start, kicking things into gear and getting back to where they once were. So I think that Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison are both going to be possibly ascending assets. And if Javonte comes out and has a really slow start, it's going to be hard to get much for him. So I'm going to take the 107 pretty easily there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of selling high on Javonte's current value. You look back this time last year, Javonte was like RB3, RB4 in dynasty rankings everywhere. And he kind of showed that he was well on his way with those first couple of weeks of production in Denver, and then obviously the injury hit. I think that buying Javonte for the 107 is just way too much right now. I mean, in hindsight, fast forward a year, if he does rebound, you're not going to be able to get him for the 107. But I think that you're probably overpaying for him at the 107 currently, right? So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to take the 107. I'll take Jordan Addison or QJ over Javonte just about any day there.
That being said, really quick, I have to say though, like once it gets to 108, 109, then we can start. Then I'm like thinking, okay, I'm looking at Kendra Miller, I'm looking at Zach Charbonnet, Devin A-Chain. Like if I'm talking about running backs, then that's where I can start to say, okay, I'd rather have Javonte over those guys. But I think it's a different asset at the 107.
No, and I like that you bring that up because, Javonte, obviously, he is a big risk with the injury. Is he ever going to fully recover, right? I think he will. But is he going to be the same running back prior to the injury, even once he does fully recover? I'm not sure. But I do think he has a higher ceiling than Kendra Miller, Zach Charbonnet, Devon A-Chain. I would consider Javonte over Zay Flowers or Will Levis in these super flex leagues, right? So I do like that you point that out. 107 is too rich, but if we move that back even 109, then we're going to have a serious discussion on, okay, maybe we do like Javonte here. But I'm going to move into the next trade for Javonte, and this one makes a bit more sense, I think. This one is pretty even in my mind, and I'm excited to see what you have to say because I don't know what I'm going to say yet with it. Would you rather have Javonte Williams and a 2024 second-round pick or Jameson Williams and 302?
Yeah, that's really tough. I feel like that one kind of depends on, like, what is my roster? I feel like those two assets are completely – in the same tier. I guess I'd probably go with Javonte in the 204, just knowing that I'm moving, or Javonte in the 24 second, just knowing that I'm upgrading in terms of that draft capital. And the fact that JMO isn't going to be putting up points for at least the first 6 weeks of this season, and we don't even really know how many points he's going to be putting up after that. I think I have to go with Javonte and the pick upgrade, just because I feel like I can probably like if Javonte comes out and does much of anything, I can probably move him for JMO fairly easily and then take that free pick upgrade, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I kind of think I'm on the same page. To your point, Javonte and JMO are in very similar situations. I mean, obviously, one of them is an injury and the other one is kind of self-inflicted, right, for Jameson Williams not being on the field there. But Javonte, he'll start to hit his stride again midway through the season, which is coincidentally when Jameson Williams is going to come in. The big difference, though, is that Jameson Williams can practice, go through training camp, everything like that. So I do think he's going to be a bit more prepared when the time comes. I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up for me. I do think I lean Javonte, though, just like you, because, I mean, running backs, they're kind of hard to come by, right? Finding a top 10 running back is not easy, and I'm not calling Javonte a top 10 running back, but just a year ago, he was considered top 5, and I like that kind of upside. I do like the upside that comes with Jameson Williams, but in a similar tier, I'm always going to lean the running back upside, especially when it's a guy young like that, right? Like Javonte Williams is still very young. He's got a lot of career left ahead of him. So we'll see what happens. But, Tyler, I know you got some guys that we want to go over today, so who is your first one?
Yeah, so my first one is going to be Kenny Walker. And the first trade we have here is going to be Kenny Walker and Pat Friermuth for Najee Harris and George Kittle.
Oh, that's good. I think I'm going to take Najee and Kittle though. I mean, I think I prefer Najee over Walker in a 1-for-1, and I'm pretty sure I prefer Kittle over Friermuth in a 1-for-1 as well. So I am going to take that side. I think Najee Harris is going to have a resurgence in 2023. I mean, if you look at his 2022, it's a tale of two seasons. First half of the season, not so good. Second half of the season, I think from week 10 or week 11 until the end of the season, he was either the RB5 or RB6 in PPR. Kenny Pickett's going to get better. That Steelers offense is going to get better. And Najee Harris is going to be healthy. So I like him in a 1-for-1 over Kenny Walker in the weird situation that we find him in. And then George Kittle, I mean, George Kittle is George Kittle, right? He's got, like 5 or 6 years on Pat Friermuth. But Pat F., as good as I think he is, I don't think he's going to have a ceiling of being a top 3 or top 4 tight end on a season. And we know that is George Kittle. So maybe it's a little bit more risky, but I am going to take the Najee and Kittle side.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love Pat Friermuth, when it comes to both running backs and tight ends, it's come to a point in the market where it's like, what are you going to do for me this year? Nobody really wants to wait and see, because the lifespan is so short for running backs, and 2, it takes so long for tight ends to really develop in the league. So if you can get a tight end that you believe is really going to finish as the top 3 to 5 tight end, I think that's worth it. And like you said, Najee, I think he's going to have a resurgence this year. We've talked about it ad nauseum this offseason, that we think, he was coming off a Liz Frank injury last year and still put up a very serviceable and startable season and a really strong end to the year last year. So I am expecting him to carry on with that for at least the next year or two. And being that Kenny Walker has that added competition in his backfield, I know people like Jaylen Warren a lot, and I heard somebody say the other day that he was better straight up than Najee Harris, but I don't really see him as much of a threat. I think Najee is going to be, again, the focal point of this Pittsburgh offense. And I think that's the piece I'd probably rather have over Friermuth right now. I mean, even just looking at like startup values, I think I'd probably rather go Najee and Kittle. Quite not easily, but I think by a decent margin. So now into the next one. This one's, I think, a little bit more interesting. So we have Kenny Walker and Rashod Bateman, or Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Roschon Johnson.
Roschon Johnson, you said?
Yeah.
So Jameson and Roschon or Kenny Walker and Bateman. That is really interesting. Maybe we're too scared of Zach Charbonnet, right? Like, there's a possibility Charbonnet comes in and he's literally just a change of pace guy, maybe plays the occasional third down. There's a very real possibility that we could still see Kenny Walker dominating the touches in this offense. But also, when Seattle takes a second-round running back like that, or maybe it was early third round, I can't remember at this point. But
early second, it was top 40.
Okay, so early second-round running back. I mean, they're going to use him. Like if they don't, why would they make that pick, right? Like, you don't take a guy in the top 40, or you don't take a guy in the top 50, right? And not to plan on using him to some capacity his rookie year. I'm not a big fan of Bateman, straight up. I like the talent. I don't like the situation. I don't think we're going to see much out of Bateman until he gets a second contract, hopefully with a different team. I don't really see a big future for him in Baltimore. Rocky start, injuries. Now he's battling Zay Flowers, OBJ, Mark Andrews, Jose Likely. Like, that's crowded there. On the other side, JSN is probably a top 15 dynasty wide receiver in just about everyone's rankings right now. If not, he's pretty damn close to it, right? And then Roschon Johnson, I like his upside as much as anyone in the 2023 class. We don't know who the RB3 is, right? Like, I personally lean Kendre Miller, but you can make an option or an argument for Roschon. You can make an argument for Charbonnet, which is another reason why I'm fading Kenny Walker a bit. You can make another option for A-Chain, right? So it's kind of JSN and the scratch off that is Roschon at the running back position. But I think I am going to take JSN and the scratch off with Roschon, because we know what we're going to get in JSN, or at least we think we do, right? JSN, sky high. You're like, there is no limit to his ceiling. He could be an incredible, like Amon-Ra St. Brown type dynasty wide receiver as soon as this year. So I'm going to take the upside there. I can't take Kenny Walker and Bateman over JSN.
I think that I'm 100% with you. Number one, I want JSN, and that's just based off my personal bias. But I think a lot of people are forgetting just how good of a prospect JSN was, like how dominant he was in the offense with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. People are obsessing over Marvin Harrison Jr., and a lot of people are already like going into the tank for the 2024 season, being that Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to be there. And I mean, like, JSN was Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. I think people are forgetting that just because he was drafted right next to QJ and and Addison and Flowers. So they were all drafted right in the same range. People expected JSN to maybe go a little bit higher, and he didn't. And now he's drafted into kind of a crowded room with DK and Tyler Lockett. But I mean, this guy was considered a generational prospect last year, and just what he could be. I'm going to take that and run with it and hope that all the issues for Kenny Walker's crowded backfield, Rashod Bateman's crowded receiving core. I'm just going to take that and the scratch off. Give me JSN and Roschon.
So we are very clearly fading Kenny Walker. And I mean, in the startup draft, right, if he falls past ADP, I'm fine with taking him. People, if you hit on Kenny Walker, like if he can continue being even 75% of what we saw him be in 2022, I think he's a steal at his current ADP for sure. But I just really don't want to bet on that. It's going to become a two-headed monster. Geno Smith is going to air the ball out. I mean, they brought in JSN, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett is at least a top 3 wide receiver trio in the league going into 2023, I would say. If it's not top 3, it's top 5. So they're going to be airing that ball out. I don't know. We're fading Kenny Walker. It is what it is. But going into my second guy, let's ramp it up a little bit. Let's talk high profile. Saquon Barkley. Now, the reason why he's in this video, right, not that Saquon is a very controversial running back these days, but there could be potential controversy in New York if he does not get a contract by the time the deadline happens for those franchise tags to turn into a long-term contract. He is threatening to sit out week 1 and beyond. And that makes Saquon an interesting player to talk about in dynasty formats or even in redraft formats, right? But super flex format, Tyler, are you taking Saquon Barkley or are you taking Jordan Love, Tank Bigsby, and a mid-2024 first?
Oh, the first kind of throws a wrench in things. I mean, I think getting a starting quarterback and a first could be fair value. But then again, if Jordan Love comes out and he ends up like, the QB 28 this year or 24 or something like that, and he's barely even startable, then I think you're selling yourself short. I'm not really a believer in running backs holding out. It never really happens or materializes. It's always like an empty threat most of the time. They usually don't get what they want. So I'm not going to be scared of that. I think, I guess I would probably have to liquidate Saquon for a starting quarterback, and if I'm projecting it to be a mid, possibly even early first, then yeah, I would have to consider that one and probably say that's the better value side. But it could go either way. If Jordan Love's a zero, then it's negligible. There's no real edge there, I don't think.
It's tough because if we think of the 2024 first as mid, right, we can say maybe that's the equivalent to the 24, 107, or 108. You translate that into what you're getting in 2023. You're getting a guy like Jordan Addison or QJ. Obviously, different prospects in 2024, but year over year, there's usually about the same amount of depth in terms of that. And 2024 might even be a bit more shallow. So I think that the 2024 pick, it looks good on paper, but I don't know if I could sell Saquon Barkley for this, man. He's going to have a good 2023, and if he doesn't hold out and he's on the field week one, I mean, dude, if Saquon Barkley puts up more points week one than Jordan Love, you're going to be looking at that and regret that trade immediately, I think. Now, there is a possibility Jordan Love could be good, but the small sample size that we've seen from him in the NFL, with a better receiving core, mind you, wasn't very good. I don't personally believe in Jordan Love very much. So in a lot of situations, if I can get a starting quarterback, a first-round pick, and even a guy like Tank Bigsby, if I can get all of those for a running back like Saquon Barkley, usually I would take it. But for Jordan Love being the quarterback, I don't think it's enough. There's too many question marks there. I need something a bit more solidified than Jordan Love at the quarterback position for me to pull the trigger on that. So by the skin of my teeth, I'm going to choose the Saquon Barkley side and on this one.
Yeah, I mean, like, could it be like Daniel Jones in a first instead, or like even I don't know, Kenny Pickett in a first, or something like that? Someone who I've seen play already, and someone who I think is in a good offense. Like, I think there's a handful of guys I would rather it be, but I can't really say that Jordan Love is out of that tier with those guys for me. So I think it's probably fair value to liquidate. But
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but that's why we look at these trades and kind of gauge what the market value is on these guys. But overall, fair trade. I'm just not taking the risk on Jordan Love. But one more trade involving Saquon Barkley. I think this one's going to be a pretty good one. Kind of feel like I know where you're going with it already. But would you like Saquon Barkley and the 302 or Stefon Diggs?
Saquon. Give me the hammer running back, I guess. I think that's a pretty lateral move. I mean, you're getting contending asset for contending asset. I think that's like a personal preference one right there. I would just go with Saquon because I've watched him tear up the Dallas Cowboys for the last handful of years. But although Stefon Diggs is someone I'm really high on too, and if I'm a contending roster, like, I want either one of those guys, and I think they're exactly the same value. It comes down to team need. I know that's a lame answer, but like, the assets both do the same thing for you, just in different positions. So that being said, I think it's harder to find running backs in that range. So I'm going to go with Saquon.
No, I completely agree with you. And it is a case-by-case thing. Saquon Barkley and Stefon Diggs, I mean, if they both are fully healthy for the 2023 season, they're going to put up a similar amount of points. But those amount of points are harder to get from the running back position. So hypothetically speaking, if Barkley doesn't hold out, this is an even trade. I would take the Saquon Barkley side with the possibility of him holding out. Saquon's 26 years old, 25 years old. So he still has a few years left in the tank. Stefon Diggs is 30, but he doesn't really show signs of slowing down. We're probably getting the same amount of longevity between the two. But I without knowing the situations of these teams, 51% Barkley for me, 49% Stefon Diggs. If I have some other running backs that I can pivot to, I'll take Diggs. If I don't have those running backs, I'll take Barkley. So fair trade. Kudos to both of these managers.
Yeah, definitely. Same shelf life, pretty similar production. So flip a coin and make your pick there. So I'm going to hop into Tony Pollard now. I think is really interesting given the fact that Zeke is not there anymore and he finished as the RB7 last year. Well, Zeke was also, a top 12 running back in his own right because he had all the goal line work and that short yardage work, and he was pretty effective. At least they handed him the ball enough to the point where he wasn't effective enough in fantasy. But here, Tony Pollard, the lone wolf in the backfield with just Rojo and Malik Davis. So this one, little bit interesting. It's Michael Pittman and Samaje Perine for just Tony Pollard. So you have that Indianapolis wide receiver 1 for Anthony Richardson, and you have a guy who a lot of people are expecting to take a lot of workload away from Javonte, especially if he's not healthy in the beginning of the season. So which side are you taking there?
I want to take Pollard. When you first said it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting. But before you even finish your sentence, I was like, no, it's got to be Pollard. I mean, Michael Pittman's good. I really like Michael Pittman. But with a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, he's not going to have a massive 2023, right? Like, we love Anthony Richardson for fantasy purposes because we think he's going to be, like the next Cam Newton type, right? A really good runner, not necessarily the best passer. And yeah, there's going to definitely be room for, wide receivers and tight ends to be fantasy relevant and even be, top 20 at their positions with Anthony Richardson. It's not going to happen in 2023 though. And Pittman, I mean, his ceiling is probably top 15, top 16, and it's going to take a lot for us to get that ceiling out of him. Samaje Perine, he's just a rental. He's going to have a good, solid first half of the season, I think, and then Javonte will take over once he's starting to feel a bit more healthy. I do like Denver's offense this year with Sean Payton, but I have to take Pollard because he has overall RB1 upside. Like, dude, Ezekiel Elliott had over 200 carries for them last year. They let Zeke go. You mean to tell me Malik Davis and Ronald Jones are going to severely cut into Tony Pollard's workload? Probably not. Like Pollard was a top 10 running back in PPR last year, and I don't see any way that he can't at least match his production from last year. Like, in our projections, I have him as RB3, only behind Eckler and Christian McCaffrey for the 2023 season. And I mean, dude, he's playing on the franchise tag, right? So he wants to play for that contract. If he repeats a big year, I know Dallas kind of got burned with a big running back contract recently, but they'll give him money. They'll give him money if he's solid in 2023. So I'm going to take Pollard. I think better short-term option for sure. And yeah, I'm going to get 2 to 4 good seasons out of Pollard because he really doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires. So I think that one's a smash for me.
Yeah, I think in terms of like I think Michael Pittman's a really good player, but his situation, like the outlook over the next 2 or 3 years could just be like low end wide receiver 2, like for the foreseeable future. And I think Tony Pollard, being that he was one of the most efficient running backs in the league last year, and that his volume should ramp up a lot this year. Like you said, there's going to be 200 vacated touches in that offense. And a lot of them were goal line touches. I think the simple math just says don't overthink it and take Tony Pollard and where he's supposed to explode right now. This next one, we'll throw a little context in it. If you are a quarterback needy team, are you adding Tony Pollard to the 108 to go up to the 104 to get CJ Stroud, let's say? So let's call it Tony Pollard in the 108 for CJ Stroud.
Probably not. If I'm in a rebuild, like if selling Pollard puts me firmly in the rebuild, then yeah. But CJ Stroud is not going to be the quarterback that you want really leading your fantasy football team in 2023. It's going to take him a little while to come onto it. One, it's going to be a learning curve for him. 2, Houston's offense is not good. They have a new coach. They really don't have any legitimate weapons, right? Like Dalton Schultz is probably their most reliable weapon. And not that Dalton Schultz is bad, but like that's saying a lot right there. You're going to need to be patient with CJ Stroud. He's not going to be a quote unquote elite fantasy asset, probably for the first 2 seasons at least of his career. So if you're doing this move, you have to be committed to some sort of rebuild at least, right? Like if you're just doing that because you want a QB3, I don't know. I can't do it. I can't move up 4 spots. You could get Will Levis if you really need to at the 108. Keep Tony Pollard. Obviously, Will Levis probably isn't going to play much, if at all, in 2023. But I can't sell a running back that has RB overall upside like Tony Pollard for CJ Stroud. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah, I think this kind of brings up a good concept to talk about because there's a lot of people with contending rosters who will say, "Oh, I really need a quarterback right now," and they'll draft Bryce Young and expect him to be in their starting lineup right away. When in reality, you're probably better off throwing Tony Pollard in your super flex than Bryce Young or CJ Stroud this year, right? Like you look at all your favorite quarterbacks, and it's like they're finishing at like look at Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, everybody. Their rookie years, they're not top 10 quarterbacks. It's very hard to be a top 10 quarterback in the league as a rookie. And so if you're thinking of that as a positional advantage and something that's going to help you, I don't think it's the case. I think you have to be, like you said, firmly in a rebuild in order to take this. Otherwise, like if you're a contending roster, there's no reason not to take Tony Pollard and Zay Flowers or whoever, or even like Tony Pollard and Will Levis, right? Why not? I mean, I think Will Levis is going to get a shot at some point this year. And I think that makes that trade make a lot more sense to just hold on to Pollard, unless it's like you have a fairly barren roster. Tony Pollard exploded for you last year. You have to sell high on him right now and go get your long-term quarterback. That's the only real situation I'm probably doing. That's it.
Yep, completely agree.
All right, yeah, so that was my last one for Tony Pollard, and now you are up, my friend.
Oh, all right. So last guy for me, Rachaad White. Not a super sexy name, but not really someone we've talked a lot about on this channel, and he's got a weird situation. Everyone in Tampa Bay is a weird situation because we're moving on to the Baker Mayfield / Kyle Trask era. No more Tom Brady, no more Leonard Fournette, right? Those are two pretty big subtractions. And Rachaad White is the de facto RB1 in Tampa Bay, but not a lot of people are buying into it. You know, some people are hopping back on Chase Edmonds hype train for whatever reason. And then you have some people that really think Sean Tucker is going to come in. If he's healthy, he could steal this job from Rachaad White, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I don't think we are giving Rachaad White enough credit. He is a solid enough RB2 for fantasy purposes right now. But Tyler, I got two trades for you. 1-for-1 straight up, Rachaad White or Diontae Johnson?
Diontae. Diontae's seen 100 plus targets, and granted, I'm not even really a big Diontae fan.
140 plus targets, 3 years running.
Yeah, like how many? He's been a ridiculous target hog, and I think Kenny Pickett probably takes a step up this year, like a lot of second-year quarterbacks do. I think that offense becomes a little bit more efficient. I do still think it's going to be centered around Najee, but yeah, I like Diontae Johnson. Like I don't see George Pickens as a really great threat. I mean, George Pickens had like a 15% target share or something like low like that last year. It was not great. Wasn't anything close to what those other rookie receivers that we love did last year. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with that side.
Yeah, I'll take Diontae as well. Rachaad White, I mean, he's got his fair share of upside, but realistically, Tampa Bay is probably in contention to be one of the worst teams in football this year because they don't have a solidified answer at quarterback. I mean, you can't necessarily count them out. When your receivers are Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and you got a solid defense, right? I don't want to guarantee that they'll be a bottom 3 team, but if a team is in a conversation like that, how often are they really going to be running the ball, right? So it's tough. It's hard to imagine that he gets the workload to do anything better than maybe the RB20, right? And Diontae Johnson, if you can, I mean, we're looking at it, he can easily get his 4th season in a row of 140 plus targets. If you just give him even a few touchdowns, a slightly better efficiency than last year, he's all of a sudden in the top 15, top 16 wide receivers from 2022. And I believe back in 2021, he was wide receiver 8 or 9 overall in PPR leagues. I think the upside is there. I think the longevity is there with Diontae. And I mean, dude, the best thing that you can get in fantasy football is your players to have opportunity. There's not many receivers or players in general that are getting more opportunity than Diontae. So I will take Diontae over Rachaad White. Even if I'm desperate for a running back, I'm probably not selling Diontae for Rachaad White. But one more for you. Would you rather have Rachaad White and the rookie pick 205 or a projected mid 2024 first?
Give me the first all day, and not even a question. Give me the 24 first. I think you brought up a really good point before. Like, these running backs have to be on good teams. They don't have to be, but most of the time, they are. Our top 6, top 7, 8 finishing running backs are usually always on those elite offenses. You see stats about it all the time that like these teams that are ahead, they they run the ball more often than the teams who are behind. It's just basic football math, even though I think Rachaad White's opportunity is going to grow a lot this year with all the vacated touches, like just give me the mystery box, the Pandora's box in the first, and I'll replace Rachaad White somewhere else. I'll go send a second and I don't know, somebody gross for James Conner or whatever like that. Like give me that. I can take that second, go flip it for James Conner. Now it looks like James Conner and a first for Rachaad White. That's like a smash all day. And even if you have to throw 2/3 on that, it's like whatever you have to do. Get a running back in that tier and take the first. Like use the second for something else. That's easy for me.
Yeah, I agree, because that pick 205, I mean, if you're looking at the consensus rankings, that's going to be a guy like Roschon Johnson, Sam Laporta, Jonathan Mingo, Josh Downs, Rashee Rice, Tank Bigsby. None of these guys are really anyone that I'm personally writing home about in Dynasty formats. So, yeah, I'll take the first-round pick, and then I'll flip that 205 into – you might be able to get James Conner straight up for the 205, right? Like that's something I would much rather do. I would gladly flip Rachaad White for James Conner in a first, and in the grand scheme of things, right? And like you said, even if you have to add in a few of those minor picks or a minor player in there, not the end of the world. So completely agree with you. If you can turn Rachaad White to almost any capacity into a future first round pick, I probably doing that just about every time. But Tyler, I know you got one more guy for us here today before we wrap up the video. So who is that going to be?
Yeah, that guy is going to be the supposed jailbird, who is no longer going to be a jailbird, in Alvin Kamara. He's a guy who people were expecting to, be suspended for a decent chunk of the season. I think the expectations are going down a little bit. I think he still can be a top 12 running back, even with Kendra Miller coming in. So, new situation for him. And this first trade, I think you are going to have maybe a little bit of trouble with, because it has 3 guys that you like on one side, or at least 2 guys that you like on one side. I'm not sure how you feel about Alvin Kamara, but it's Kamara, Godwin, and Diontae Johnson for George Pickens and Devonta Smith.
Pickens and Devonta Smith. That's tough. Because I really like Devonta. I'm not like a massive George Pickens fan, but like there definitely is upside there. Like if I'm wrong about George Pickens, I'm not going to be surprised. I don't think I will be, but I'm also not. I don't know. He's a weird guy for me to rank right now. But Smith is at worst a top 15 dynasty wide receiver. George Pickens could be in that top 24 discussion this time next year with a solid season under his belt. True, and I don't know. I think this is pretty even. I guess you could say, like if I'm in a rebuild or my team's younger and I want them to keep I want to keep them young, I'm gonna take Smith and Pickens. If I'm going for it for this year and I don't really care what's happening to my roster 2024 and beyond, I will take the Kamara side, because Kamara, like you said, he's going to have some pretty good weeks. I don't necessarily see him finishing as a top 12 running back, and I do think he's still going to get hit with maybe a 4 to 6 week suspension. But I mean, that's fine. You're still going to get Kamara for 10 to 12 games on the season. Chris Godwin, I'm a really big fan of his. You know that. Everyone knows that. And I think that he's going to have a solid 2023. But again, it comes down to, can Baker Mayfield support good numbers for his wide receivers? And in very recent years, we've seen that he really can't. So, shoot, dude, I don't know. I think in pure dynasty, 1-for-1, not knowing any context, I actually will take the Pickens, Devonta Smith side. But if you're a contender, I totally see the desire to go out and get Kamara, Godwin, and Diontae.
I think for the first time, I'm going to disagree with you and take the older side, but it more so has to do with my disdain for George Pickens and the fact that I think like it's so likely, it could be so possible. I don't want to say likely, but it's so possible that he could somewhat turn into a Chase Claypool type of guy who just had like a good rookie year with a handful of big plays and then just totally fades off. I think he's better than Chase Claypool, but I still think there's a chance that he could just be so insignificant that you're really looking at this as like Devonta Smith and a roster clogger for Kamara, Godwin, and Diontae. And with that kind of like adding that kind of production to your roster for the next 2 years, 3 years, that I think that's enough for me. I think I would be okay with sending this if my roster is not, completely in a rebuild, I think I'd definitely be okay with taking the Kamara, Godwin, and Diontae side.
I think overall it's a coin toss without knowing the value, because Diontae and George Pickens have an incredibly similar ADP. Like, they are basically right next to each other in almost every draft out there. And then Kamara and Godwin for Devonta Smith straight up, that's probably somewhat of a fair trade, right? So I think that if you were to plug this into a trade calculator of some sort, it probably would be pretty damn close. I didn't pull up a trade calculator or anything like that, but just kind of knowing where these guys are going in drafts, I think it's a coin toss. But I don't blame anyone for taking either side. Usually I would agree with you and I would take the older guys, but I don't know. I'm feeling for the younger guys in Dynasty today, I guess. I don't know.
All right, so last trade for the day, and this one's going to be super weird because none of these assets are like really similar at all. Side A is going to be Kamara and Pittman. Side B is going to be Geno and Mike Williams.
I gotta take Geno and Mike Williams. I have to. I absolutely have to. I mean, dude, Geno Smith, he was a top 5 quarterback last year. They gave him improvements. They gave him a contract. Geno is what, 32, 34, something like that. I mean, he's got a few years left in the tank at least. And it's not like he has any tread on the tires. I mean, he's been a career backup for the last 5 years. So I'm going to take him. I'm going to take Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams has probably the same upside that Michael Pittman does, maybe even arguably more. I think Williams is more of a volatile player than Michael Pittman for sure. But Mike Williams could get you some absolute massive weeks, right? So I'm fine with trading. I'm fine with trading Pittman and Kamara to get Geno and Mike Williams there. Because I mean, dude, Geno is the QB2 that you want on your dynasty roster. Like, if you can't afford to go out and overspend on a guy like Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, whatever, Geno is the perfect pivot right now. He is like the perfect dynasty contending quarterback, in my opinion. And I think trading Pittman and Kamara is actually a pretty fair price for that. So I'll take the Geno side.
Yeah, and I'm going to side with you on this one. I think I now view Geno Smith in a similar light to like Kirk Cousins. Just the fact that Geno just hasn't been able to start for the last, 10 years or whatever it was. But yeah, he's still got some tread left on the tires. He's a lot younger than the other guys who are going in a similar range. Like I think Aaron Rodgers is probably going not in like the same round as Geno Smith in startups, but in terms of like the order the quarterbacks go, Geno and Aaron Rodgers and those guys are all in the same tier. And I think Geno could give you a handful of years. And like you said, I think Mike Williams, while he probably doesn't have the same season-long consistency as Michael Pittman, the weekly upside is immense. And this is definitely a very good winning move to get 2 question marks off your roster for one really solid piece and one like lottery ticket every single week. A guy who could literally just win your week from your second or third flex spot in Mike Williams. So I'm going to take the quarterback and the old receiver over the old running back and the receiver in a crappy situation.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I'm noticing a trend. We are fading a lot of running backs that we went over today. But I mean, it's so hard not to. But a lot of the trades are pretty close. And if you are in need of a running back, I can totally understand where a lot of these trades are coming. And I can totally understand why the market is shaping up to be where it needs to be. So if you are super running back needy, it doesn't hurt to kick the tires on guys like Kamara, Rachaad White, all those guys that we went over today. But just keep in mind, running back prices between now and the season are going to slowly start to go up. So if you are going to buy a running back, do it now because the price is not going to get cheaper. But that's going to do it for us here on Goal Line Dynasty. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are not currently subscribed. And if you are currently subscribed, hit that bell icon so every single time we post, you will be notified. Make sure you hit that like button if you like this video and leave us a comment. Let us know, what running backs are you going after ahead of the 2023 season? And who do you think we can, really see a breakout from that's going to far surpass where their current value is?
I want to point out the fact that every other Dynasty show you probably watch that talks about running backs is talking about Breece Hall and Bijan and Gibbs and these easy ones. And we're taking the time to go over the tough ones. So yeah, give us that subscribe.
Yeah, we do surely appreciate that. But for myself, for Tyler, for Goal Line Dynasty, we will see you next time.